The Muslims for hundreds of years tried to convince us that the Quran is unchanged and preserved. When we ask them why are there so many different readings of the Quran and why are there so many variants, many uneducated Muslims will then try to answer and parrot the same nonsense and say, there is not one single letter or vowel that is changed, which of course is a big fat lie. And their imams and shuyukh repeat this lie publicly. But among themselves, they know very well that they are lying and they are deceiving their gullible Muslim audience and other people who do not know much about this very topic. But when Muslims discuss this topic behind closed doors, they would say to each other, this is a very difficult topic. This topic is actually the most difficult topic to talk about. And we cannot cross the red line unlike the Christians. There are actually holes in the standard narrative, as Dr. Yasir Qadhi explained.
That the standard narrative has holes in it. That's what I'm going to say. The standard narrative does not answer some very pressing questions. These are now well known within the Western Academy. These are very, very difficult issues. And the most advanced of our scholars, they're not quite fully certain how to solve all of the unanswered questions in there. Here's the point. These issues should only be discussed amongst people who know what the qira'at are and who understand some of these questions that are being raised.
So is what you're saying the shak that came, or not the shak, but the crisis that you had was in relation to this question of the relationship between the ahruf and the qira'at, basically?
No. The crisis I had wasn't that. The crisis I had was, that was what generated. But what was the crisis? The crisis was very simple. Traditional understandings of ahruf and qira'at cannot answer some of these pressing questions that are now being poked by their academics outside of the faith tradition. You see, in a Muslim environment, there's always some respect that we have for the Quran. We should. In a Muslim environment, we'll press a little bit and then we'll say, okay, khalas, sami'na wa ata'na. And that's great, alhamdulillah. When you go to academia, they don't have that red line. And they're going to just, the famous story of the emperor with no clothes. They're going to just point out, no, that doesn't make any sense. Well, that's not true, and this and that. And they'll bring issues, which I'm not going to mention explicitly, that you know are true because they're in your own books. They're not inventing anything new.
But we have to put our brains and logic aside. But even if there are so many differences in the recitations and readings, we as Muslims have to believe all of it is the Quran, and Allah knows best. That's what they always say, right? In the end, Allah knows best when they don't have answers. So what are the 7 ahruf, you might ask? Well, the Muslim scholars cannot agree on what these 7 ahrufs are. So how can I as a Christian tell you what they are, right? All I know is that Mohammed is the most obvious false prophet in the history of all the prophets, and his Quran is nothing but a fabricated, man-made book. There are actually around 40 different opinions from the Islamic scholars about what the 7 ahruf could be. And like always, they don't agree with one another and share different opinions. So in other words, Muslims have no idea what the 7 ahrufs are. So if there's a Muslim who thinks he knows what they are, he simply is lying to you, because the early scholars could not agree what the 7 ahruf were. And neither, listen carefully, neither did Muhammad explain what the 7 ahruf were. So how can a Muslim today tell us what these 7 ahruf are? Because his prophet only said the Quran was sent down in 7 ahruf, but failed to explain what these 7 ahruf were. So please don't confuse the 7 ahruf with the many different Quran readings that we have today in our possession, or as I like to call them, the many different versions of the Quran. And as we speak, we found at least 37 different Qurans, and the number is growing. Yes, you heard that correctly. Now that we moved that out of the way, we need to talk about a certain verse of the Quran which is mentioned many times in recent debates with Muslim apologists. And like always, the Muslims, like Ibn Fibn footnote, either lie about it or, like most Muslims, only parrot what they heard about the following ayah of the Quran. simply because they don't read what the early mufassirun or commentators have said about this infamous chapter 3, ayah 146 of the Quran.
This is a fight.
Yeah.
Okay? Could you write down the other word meaning for it?
Again,
There's a fight, both is a fight?
let me explain it.
Okay.
So, qutila,
Yeah.
are you paying attention now?
Yeah, I'm paying attention, yeah.
Qatila, both can mean to fight and kill.
Okay.
Understand?
Oh, they both mean fight and kill?
Both, yeah.
Okay, go ahead, please read that.
When you look at the Arabic word of qatala, it comes from the root word that means to fight, and the word qatal, murder or kill, has the same root word. So qutila.
You know Arabic?
Yes, I know Arabic.
Okay, hold on. Okay, let me see that if you know the Arabic, okay?
If we start to compare different readings with one another, we'll see the contradictions and problems rising up. As you see on the screen, the Hafs version says, and many a prophet fought, and the word that we are looking for is qatala, fought. Other versions like Warsh or Qalun would say, and many a prophet was killed, and the word is qutila. So the Hafs says qatala, meaning fought, but other versions like Warsh and Qalun contradict the Hafs and say qutila, meaning killed or murdered. As we mentioned earlier, if there are Muslims who claim they have studied the tafsir, i.e. the commentary about this verse, then they know that they are lying about this ayah. They know, but they will try to keep their gullible Muslim audience blind and stupid by hiding the explanation behind this ayah, like Ibn Fibn footnote here, because they should know that early Muslims did pick and choose which they liked, as we find in Tafsir At-Tabari, who is called the crème de la crème, and many Muslims hold the position that At-Tabari's tafsir is the most earliest tafsir that explains these ayahs of the Quran. Many other commentators even take from him, like Ibn Kathir. They actually take from At-Tabari's tafsir. So other gullible Muslims who haven't done their homework are simply repeating the lies and deception of their teachers. And shuyukh like Ibn Fibn footnote, and will say the root word is the same, so automatically the meaning must be the same. Well, that's a foolish claim and a big fat lie, and here is why. The Imams who have done their homework know there's a hidden disaster, but simply want to keep it secret, would not dare to talk about it in public, as Dr. Yasir Qadhi mentioned earlier.
That the standard narrative has holes in it. That's what I'm going to say. The standard narrative does not answer some very pressing questions. These are now well known within the Western Academy. These are very, very difficult issues. And the most advanced of our scholars, they're not quite fully certain how to solve all of the unanswered questions in there. Here's the point. These issues should only be discussed amongst people who know what the qira'at are and who understand some of these questions that are being raised.
So is what you're saying, the shak that came, or not the shak, but the crisis that you had was in relation to this question of the relationship between the ahruf and the qira'at, basically?
No. The crisis I had wasn't that. The crisis I had was, that was what generated. But what was the crisis? The crisis was very simple. Traditional understandings of ahruf and qira'at cannot answer some of these pressing questions that are now being poked by their academics outside of the faith tradition. You see, in a Muslim environment, there's always some respect that we have for the Quran. We should. In a Muslim environment, we'll press a little bit and then we'll say, okay, khalas, sami'na wa ata'na. And that's great, alhamdulillah. When you go to academia, they don't have that red line. And they're going to just, the famous story of the emperor with no clothes. They're going to just point out, no, that doesn't make any sense. Well, that's not true, and this and that. And they'll bring issues, which I'm not going to mention explicitly, that you know are true because they're in your own books. They're not inventing anything new.
Many Muslims started to doubt and became apostates after that famous but disastrous discussion between Sheikh Yasir Qadhi and Mohammed Hijab. So when we ask Muslims, are both reading from Allah? Muslims will say, yes, of course. But how can they be from Allah if the early Muslims picked and chose what they liked and totally rejected the other reading because they thought the other reading was a mistake and doesn't make any sense? And here's the proof from Tafsir At-Tabari to back it up and expose the lies of these dawagandists who always lie. But what else is new? In Tafsir al-Tabari for chapter 3, ayah 146, we see that the early Muslims differed in the reading of the ayah and simply rejected the reading which did not make any sense to them. So basically, they picked their cherries when it came to the topic of different readings. Some of them read the ayah with qatala, meaning fought, and others with qutila, meaning killed. So when they read qatala, fought, they chose to read it like that. So notice, my friends, they chose because clearly they did not believe that both readings could be from Allah or both readings are correct. And the Tabari explains why they chose qatala, meaning fought. Because if the prophets were killed or murdered, Allah would have not said فَمَا وَهَنُوا, meaning nor did they weaken. It would be impossible to be weakened when a prophet is already killed. In other words, how can an already killed prophet be weak? That doesn't make sense afterwards. The prophet wouldn't lose heart or lose hope if he's already killed and buried, let's say. I mean, he's dead. Can a dead corpse lose heart or hope or be weakened? So that doesn't make any sense according to them. Who are them? The early Muslims. So that doesn't make sense to them. The Arabic word used here is yastahil. It's impossible to read it as qutila, meaning killed. The correct reading, according to them, the early Muslims, should be qatala, meaning fought. That's a more logical reading of this ayah. Notice this is according to them by using their logic and reasoning for why they chose that reading over the other one. For them, the other reading doesn't make any sense. It's impossible to choose that other reading. That's what they thought. Yet today's Muslims want to tell us and convince us that both readings are the Quran. Did you catch it? But the scholars of Islam in a famous quote said, Illi tamantaq tazandaq, meaning the one who uses logic becomes an atheist. Do you see the disaster already, my friends? The Quran became basically like a lottery ticket in the hands of the early Muslims. I like to choose these certain numbers because it makes more sense to win the lottery. You understand? The early Muslims simply chose a specific reading of the Quran because they used their logic and reasoning over Allah's so-called divine revelation in sending down the Quran in the so-called 7 ahruf. Now, do you understand why Dr. Yasir Qadhi, when he was asked to write the Quran on a blank mushaf, he refused and said, there are holes in the standard narrative. As you see, this video perfectly explains these holes, my friends. Don't allow any Muslim to deceive you, my friends, regarding this topic of the many readings. No, the early Muslims did not believe that the many readings were all the Quran. So how can Muslims of today deceive themselves and try to deceive us by trying to convince us that all the readings are Quran? We have done our homework. Clearly, you Muslims did not. Stop lying. Stop lying, ya Imams. Stop lying, ya Shuyukh. Just stop. This is embarrassing. I feel sorry for any Muslim who is watching right now. You should feel embarrassed that a Christian knows Islam better than you and is showing you these hidden secrets. Again, the early Muslims did not believe that there was one Quran, or let alone all the readings were from Allah. So neither should you, my Muslim friends. Please share this video all over social media and let it go viral. Peace of Christ to all of you.